back to Elisa Does Life. Apparently we're still a book channel. I am on my 4th cup of coffee for the day. I should probably be taking a nap, but instead I've decided to sit down with you all and talk about a book that when I went on to Goodreads to like type out a little book review, I was just astonished to find out that there are not nearly enough people who have read this book. This book is so underrated. I knew I had to make a video instead. And what other book could I be talking about except for The Night of Blackened Darkness by Dan Wells. Now, when I sat down to film my Way of Kings review, I was super prepared. I had all my little talking points I wanted to make written down in a little beautiful outline so that I wouldn't stray too far from the script. And today, I don't have any preparation other than the fact that I absolutely fell in love with this story and flew through it. I literally finished it just today and decided I could not wait. I needed to sit down and rant about how amazing it is. So if I seem a bit more chaotic in this video than I did in my last, that is why. Also, I feel like this review necessitated a little more chaos than perhaps Brandon Sanderson's novel did. And that is because one of the things that comes across really clearly in this story is Dan's sense of humor. One of the reasons why the story was so good is because his sense of humor really shines throughout the entirety of the story. The whole story is super engaging, partly because these characters that he has written, and these little quirky characters, are just the perfect juxtaposition of the fact that they are indeed real-life historical figures, mostly within the literary world. But they're such a fun part of that world, and they are just getting caught up in these crazy antics, and it makes the story a real page turner. It's hard to put the book down because you're always trying to anticipate what crazy thing is going to happen next. And I love getting to see this quirky, goofy side of some people who we are probably very familiar with. For example, we have John Keaton as a part of the story. I don't think that's a huge spoiler. He shows up very quickly, and he is an English poet who likes to rhyme with everything that people are telling him throughout the story. It makes it a really fun part of the narrative because he will always choose a rhyme over accuracy, and it makes him this really unreliable character, but also drives the plot along in a really fun way. And I feel like one of the things that really also shines through is how nerdy Dan Wells is, because there are so many little Easter eggs about these literary figures that you wouldn't really know unless you were familiar with them, you had some understanding of their life. It felt very akin to the feeling I had watching Midnight in Paris starring Owen Wilson, which is one of my favorite films of all time. If you're unfamiliar with that story, it features Owen Wilson going back in time to visit some of his literary heroes and falling in love with the world that they lived in. Their real life personalities really came through in that film, and it's a very romanticized version of all of those historical figures. And I felt that same sense of romance and wonder in looking back on a past time through the eyes of a character who is meeting all of these famous historical and literary figures. And we get to see it all through the eyes of the very unlucky Frederick Withers, who I believe is based on the English architect who brought Gothic architecture to America. And so we have all of these crazy antics going on, and Frederick Withers is just in the middle of it all, trying to make sense of what's going on. Wants to see this one thing through. It should have been such a simple task. And time again, the most bewildering things that could possibly happen just keep on happening. And so I loved seeing him as the main character being so unlucky, being so unsure of what to do in these crazy situations that he finds himself in, and getting to see a very different version of all of these historical figures than we're maybe used to hearing about. It was just such a fun concept for a novel, and I really appreciated it. Now, getting into some light spoiler territory, I do want to talk about one of the things that Dan Wells does with his vampires that I thought was a really fun twist on the normal vampire tropes that we see in a lot of modern media today. I am currently writing my own vampire story, and I feel like one of the most fun and challenging things about writing vampire stories is trying to put some sort of twist on the lore or the tropes that already exist within that kind of subgenre. There are so many different stories out there about vampires. You have things like Dracula, What We Do in the Shadows, you have Blade, Castlevania, and all of these stories seek to put a new spin on the already established lore of these kind of mythical creatures. And so one of the things that I found really fun in the story was the twist that Dan Wells put on the vampires within his book, and that was that they were not strong creatures. They were extremely weak and feeble. They don't even attack living people. They only attack people in their sleep because they're not able to overpower victims that are not subdued in some way. And so I really thought that was a fun little detail to add. It made the story much more intriguing and interesting because they were much more limited in their abilities as they kind of came up with these different challenges that they came across. Start with the man who attempted to commit forgery and end up with some of the most fun and ridiculous antics that you could find within a fantasy realm. So huge recommendation. I absolutely love this story, and I don't understand why it doesn't get more hype. It is such a fun novel. It is a pretty quick read. It's around 70,000 words, and yet it is a very fun and complete story. So I would definitely recommend it. If you like this video, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and comment down below what books you think are most underrated that you think I should check out. And I will see you all in the next video. Happy reading. Bye!